In the early 1930s in Fayetteville, Arkansas, near what is now the Drakefield Airport, there was a man who lived in a log house atop a mountain who had a nasty drinking habit. One night, the man came home inebriated and went to bed. His wife was caring for their sick child, who was crying very loudly in pain. The man became so angry at the baby for keeping him awake that he jumped out of bed, grabbed the baby, stumbled outside, and threw the baby down their water well. The wife, in complete hysteria, grabbed the well rope and jumped in to save her poor child. The man simply took an axe and cut the rope, leaving his wife and child in the well to die. He soon left town and was never seen again. It is said that at night, when the moon is full, you can walk by that well and hear the screams of a distraught woman and the pained cries of an infant. The legend of Ghost Mountain. The state of Arkansas is full of disturbing stories of hauntings, monsters, and unsolved mysteries. Join us now as we explore these creepy legends of the natural state, or in this case, the supernatural state, in this episode of Snipe Hunt. Welcome back to Snipe Hunt. I'm Darren Young.
And I am Gary Clevenstein, and we're your guides into the world of the weird. This is the third episode of this podcast, so be sure to listen to the first two episodes if you haven't already. And of course, thanks for listening. Today we'll be starting a two-part series on the creepy legends of Arkansas, and trust me, there are a lot of them. I am sure anyone listening in Arkansas will be familiar with a few of these local legends.
If not, then you will be after listening to these episodes. I wanted to do these Arkansas legends, well, because I live here, and before you feel sorry for me, it's actually a great place to live. Northwest Arkansas constantly makes it in all the best places to live in the U.S. lists. I grew up hearing about some of these legends, and then a few of them I learned while I was doing research for this episode. So have you heard any of these, like the Ozark Howler or Fouke Monster?
You know what? These are actually new to me.
I'm sure you've heard of the Crescent Hotel, though.
That one.
Yeah,
yes,
that's the one everyone's heard about. That
I'm going to go stay there someday.
Yeah, me too. I actually thought about doing it for more research for this podcast, but I was like, no, I don't want to be that extra. At least not yet, but we'll get to that in part 2. So before we get started, if you are an Arkansan, I need you to put down your Tyson chicken, take off your Razorback hat, and put your hand over the left side of your Walmart shirt as we have a moment of silence and play the Arkansas State Anthem. No, not really. Let's jump into it. All right.
I got my hopes up.
All right. Maybe for part 2. So what is first?
First thing we're going to talk about is the Ozark Howler. And this description is from cryptids.wikia.com. The Ozark Howler, also known as the Ozark Black Howler, is a legendary creature that is purported to live in remote areas in Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. It is typically described as being bear-sized, with thick body, stocky legs, black shaggy hair, and as having prominent horns. Its cry is often described as being a combination of a wolf's howl and an elk's bugle. Interesting. Cryptozoologists have speculated that the creature might be misidentified or unrecognized.
That next word is big.
Right. Sorry. Cryptozoologists have speculated that the creature might be a misidentified or unrecognized big cat. Anthropologists have speculated that the creature might be a branching off of the dark dog of death found in British folklore. But a few evolutionists who believe in the Ozark Howler believe that it's a mountain lion breed who has either mutated into a new subspecies or is a hybrid of a mountain lion and an unknown creature.
Yeah, and the thing about cryptozoologists is they study stuff that may or may not exist. They sound like wackadoodles, but a lot of them, obviously, they all take this very seriously. So if there's going to be something out there like the Ozark Howler, they're not going to be like, oh, yep, since you told us about it, it definitely exists. They're definitely going to investigate into it and see what it could be before they chalk it up to some weird creature. So they've never heard of this creature before this time. This is actually a relatively recent creature sighting thing. This is a relatively recent encounter. So when cryptozoologists first heard of this, they're kind of skeptical about it. The few cryptozoologists started to track down the first mention of the Ozark Howler on the web, and they found a website called Researching the Ozark Howler, which stated to be owned by an Ozark Howler research group. And you can't see my air quotes, but I'm doing
I
air
see
quotes.
them.
Okay, yeah,
Be
and
jealous.
that's all that really matters. So the website named a lead researcher of this researching Ozark Howler. His name is Joach. So
You know what I read?
So
It's a joke.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So their lead researcher is It's a Joke, a distinguished professor of biology at the Buffalo River University in eastern Oklahoma. So the issue, of course, the professor's name being is called It's a Joke, and works at the Buffalo River University in eastern Oklahoma. The problem with that is a university of that name doesn't exist.
Sorry.
Okay.
I didn't.
Well, Gary, if you had read the script beforehand,
I'm sorry.
I hope you know I'm keeping all of this in.
I know. I'm sorry. Holy crap.
So obviously the cryptozoologists were not convinced by this website and their lead researcher, It's a Joke. Okay, so if you go to the Ozark Howler Wikipedia article, you find the following. Chad Arment asserts in his book, Cryptozoology, that the Ozark Howler is a myth. The Ozark Howler myth is a hoax. According to Arment, he and many other cryptozoologists received email messages that made wild claims about Ozark Howler evidence. Damn it, Gary, stop. Stop that.
Sorry, I keep seeing.
Well, scroll down to where you can't see it anymore to the blue text.
I thought you were trying to read his name for real. I didn't think you got on. I thought you were trying to. I thought you thought it was like Middle Eastern or something.
It's a joke.
Oh my. Okay, sorry.
Okay, scroll down to where you can't see it anymore. Scroll down to the blue text.
Okay.
Okay. Crap, where was I at?
I already scrolled down again.
So, according to Arment, he and many other cryptozoologists received email messages that made wild claims about Ozark Howler evidence. These messages were tracked down to a university student who had made a bet that he could fool the cryptozoological research community. Many witnesses to seeing the Ozark Howler in person in the region prior to this hoax show that Chad Arment's assertion was only correct in one case, but not in the many cases of those who either haven't a computer or have seen the Howler prior to the hoax or have seen it without hearing of the legend. Despite this, there have been apparently sightings of the creature. It took me a while, but all I could find is this one story of a sighting.
This sighting was in Oregon County, Missouri. Don't be too fast to scoff. A friend of mine got up very early in the morning, about 4:30 a.m., and when he went outside, he noticed his livestock were very frightened and had huddled in a cluster in the corner of the fence by his house. He had some binoculars, so he took a look in the direction from which they had run. He said what he saw looked like a big black panther. He quickly changed his mind when he began walking down to his field and saw the thing running along the fence line. He said it had very long ears or horns and was black with thick fur. It had a long tail like a cat, but looked like a mix between a cat and a dog. It was broad and about as big as a Great Dane, and it had eerie reddish eyes that gave him chills. There was no reason for him to make up such a story, and he was very shaken up after the sighting.
Okay, so like I said, that was the only sighting I found of what's reported to be the Ozark Howler. There are quite a few things, obviously, that this could be. My theory is that it's a black bear, because Arkansas has plenty of black bears. In fact, before the nickname of the natural state, it was called the Bear State. So I think that's the biggest thing for this. So,
well, who doesn't like a good freaky story?
Yeah, exactly. People love scary stories, so why not, if you saw something that you couldn't explain or that you didn't recognize immediately, why not give it something like red eyes or make it bigger than it usually was? And it's the fishtail. It's where every time you tell it, it gets crazier and crazier, and then by the time you put it on the internet or something, you type it up and you're like, oh, this is actually super boring. Let me embellish it a bit. So another thing about this is people are usually proud of the region they're in, and so if there's like a local monster like this, people are gonna jump on the chance to be like, oh yeah, we're special because we have this monster where it's not seen anywhere else.
Yeah, and the more it's told, the more it's told, the better it gets.
Yeah, exactly.
The scary it
exactly.
gets.
And I don't want to come into this podcast to try to debunk everything, but I'd say in the case of the Ozark Howler, between the it's a joke and the student who was trying to fool the cryptozoological community, I mean, even just the description of this, it's got horns, giant. It's the calls mixed between elk bugle and whatever it was. It sounds more like a creature out from Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter than anything else. I mean, they tried to make it like believable enough to where you could believe in it, but I think it's just Black Bear and then some people just running some stories along the interwebs.
It's like a good game of telephone.
Exactly. That's all we have for the Ozark Howler. If I missed anything, let me know. Or if you have seen Ozark Howler, you can email us about your sighting, and we'll be happy to tell on the show.
And we want pictures.
We do want pictures, lots of them, as many as you can get. It's the fuzzier, the blurrier, and the less focused, the better.
We'll also take drawings. If you want to draw it for us.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe it's like Bigfoot. I think the reason why we can't get a good picture of Bigfoot because I think he's naturally blurry.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's why. But anyway, okay, speaking of Bigfoot, let's move on to the Fouke Monster. And I believe I'm pronouncing that right. So it actually has a website dedicated to it, which is foukemonster.net, and Fouke is spelled Fouke. The Fouke Monster is also known as the Southern Sasquatch, and he is sighted around the small town of Fouke, Arkansas. The description of this monster, basically, it's a Bigfoot. There's no like super special defining characteristics. It's just a giant, hairy, bipedal creature like any Bigfoot. We do have sightings on this. So from foukemonster.net, we get this excerpt. Newspaper accounts first brought regional attention to the creature starting in May of 1971. The sensational stories were mainly published in the Texarkana Gazette, but were also picked up by the Associated Press and distributed to other newspapers around the southern U.S. In 1972. You all right?
Yeah. I'm sorry. The way you read that was... Sorry, that was great.
Should I have to read it again?
Great. Yeah, read it again.
Okay.
Because you said 19... Oh, I get it.
Yeah,
that was my bad.
The U.S.
That was my bad.
I'll go and read it again.
I thought it repeated the date again. I was like, wait a minute.
Okay. I
having LOL.
I did start off with 1972 again because in the U.S. it was abbreviated, but I forgot that's the end of a sentence. So I'll go and read that again.
Sorry.
The sensational stories were mainly published in the Texarkana Gazette, but were also picked up by the Associated Press and distributed to other newspapers around the southern U.S. In 1972, following the release of the Charles B. Pierce's classic film, The Legend of Boggy Creek, which is based on actual sighting reports, the creature was launched into worldwide fame due to the movie's overwhelming success. Many people believe that sighting reports of the creature stopped in the mid-1970s after the movie mayhem died down. However, the sighting reports did not stop, nor did they truly start in 1971. Sightings of a large, hairy, man-like creature in the Fouke area date back to the early 1900s and continue right up until today.
What's funny is that music playing went perfect with
It really did. It really did. So that was the excerpt from foukemonster.net on the sightings of the Fouke Monster. The problem is, I don't know, they didn't really list a source of sightings of a large hairy man-like creature in the Fouke area date back to the early 1900s. I'm not sure how they would know that, besides people going, my great-grandpappy saw this, but I don't think there's any documented reports going back that far. The film that they're talking about, The Legend of Boggy Creek, currently has 4.9 stars out of 10 on IMDb, so despite the movie having overwhelming success, I guess, doesn't do too well.
That was what I was going to say. That's not very good.
That's not very good at all. The critics didn't like it. Although audience reviews of the movie itself are actually mostly positive. People actually do love this film. The critics didn't like it, but people did. But I feel like if they went back today and watched it again, they'd be like, ugh.
All right. Now, this excerpt is from unknownexplorers.com. The Fouke Monster made headlines in 1971 when it reported... Wait, did I say it's a Fouke Monster?
I'm not sure, but I'm calling it the Fouke Monster. Anyone from Fouke, Arkansas, feel free to contact me and correct me, but let's just go with the Fouke Monster.
Okay, we're going to go with the Fouke Monster. All right. That's a different story. All right.
Yeah.
The Fouke Monster made headlines in 1971 when it reportedly attacked the home of Bobby Ford and his wife Elizabeth the night of May 1st. According to Elizabeth Ford, the creature, which at first she thought was a bear, reached through the screen window while she was sleeping on her couch. The creature was subsequently chased away by her husband upon returning from a hunting trip with his brother Don. Shortly after midnight on May 2nd, while Mr. Ford was standing on his porch, the creature reportedly returned and grabbed Bobby's shoulder, throwing him to the ground. Mr. Ford managed to crawl free and was later treated at St. Michael's Hospital in Texarkana for scratches across his back and a mild case of shock. The Fords claimed that during the encounter they fired several shots at the creature and believed that they had hit it. However, no trace of blood was ever found. A search of the surrounding area failed to locate the creature, but did manage to locate several large, three-toed footprints close to the house, scratch marks on the porch, and some damage to the window and the house's siding. The latest sighting, according to FoukeMonster.net, was in November of 2017 in Fouke, Arkansas. A truck driver was traveling south of Fouke at approximately noon when he observed what appeared to be a large, hair-covered animal in a clear-cut pipeline. A clear-cut being an area where trees have fallen, presumably for a pipeline in this case. The figure was moving upright on two legs in the clear cut between a fence and a deer stand.
There are actually a lot of sightings of this creature, so a lot of eyewitnesses to this, which gives it more degree of validity than, say, the Ozark Howler. I like to think myself of somewhat of a Sasquatch expert.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I watched so many documentaries, Monster Quest and In Search of Bigfoot and all that stuff. No, not really. But
yeah, you do.
I never really heard of a three-toed footprint from a Bigfoot. It sounds more like a lizard man kind of thing, but...
That, yeah.
Or maybe...
I only see that with dinosaurs.
But, yeah, exactly. Maybe it was a large hairy dinosaur. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes you just gotta think outside.
You know what I want to know is why I don't ever see anything cool.
Yeah, right.
The coolest thing I have seen was this week. I saw 2 vultures. Those birds are humongous, eating a dead raccoon.
They're huge. So small sideline on,
right.
on that. Since we're talking about vultures, I actually took my dog for a hike on this trail, and so it's in a forest, so there's trees all around us. I went to like the lower part of the trail, and I look up in the trees, and this was like at the ending. This is like at the end of winter, so there are no leaves on the trees or anything. Yeah. And I just look up, dozens upon dozens of vultures roosting in the trees above me and my dog. It's getting dark, and I'm like, this is literally straight out of a horror movie.
Right.
And then like later on the trail, I saw a dead deer, and I was like, oh, okay, that's why they're here. But these things they're giant and intimidating birds, and when there's dozens roosting in the trees right above you, you can't kind of.
But everyone sees them. I want to see something cool.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the Fouke Monster.
So, actually, on the Fouke Monster, I reached out to fellow Arkansans for any supernatural experiences they might have had, and one wrote me back, and this is... The Fouke Monster is what I closely associate with the story with. I did get a couple of crazy people write me back, so I didn't include those. So this is the only story, and I actually know this guy, so... Yeah, his name is Randy. He was an old coworker of mine. So here is his story. In the December of 2009, my buddy and I went backpacking on Section 5 of the Ozark Highlands Trail. On the first night, we reached our camp, got things set up, and was eating supper when we heard a large pack of coyotes in the distance running in our direction. They got closer and closer, and the yips, barks, and howls got louder. When they got within 50 yards of us, they suddenly stopped dead in their tracks and went silent. Approximately 2 seconds later, something very large let out a roar/growl, very deep, very loud. So loud that it seemed to permeate right through us. My buddy and I grew up together. Both of us have had a love for the outdoors and have spent much of our life roaming through the wood. I have heard bears, elk, panthers, bobcats, and mountain lions, etc., but in all my years I have never heard anything like this. I'm a big believer in Bigfoot and would like to think we got visited by one that night.
That's nuts.
Yeah, that would be terrifying. Even if you grew up in the woods, that'd be a little much for me. If you're like, oh, there's some coyotes there, and you're like, Coyotes aren't that bad. I mean, they're more scared of us than they are of them. They could just scare them off if they got too close. But the fact that they all stopped and they all got quiet, and then they heard this roar, growl thing in the middle of the woods.
So I'll be like, all right, Larry.
Yeah,
time to go.
Yeah, we gotta go. We gotta go. So I am more inclined to believe in Bigfoot or Sasquatch more than some other cryptids, because it just seems like there's a lot more evidence for them. Reports of Bigfoot come from all over the world, from many different cultures. It seems weird to me that so many different cultures would all have the same thing. We have the Yeti in Tibet, we have the Sasquatch here, and Native Americans have talked about him for...
Well, they're all essentially the same creature.
Yeah. So one of the arguments on this is many thought that the wood bison, which is the largest terrestrial animal in North America, were extinct until later on. So everybody thought they were extinct, right? And then a whole herd of them was discovered in Alberta, Canada in 1957. So the thing about bison, if you didn't know, they're extremely large and not that sneaky, and they like to crowd together in herds. So if a whole herd of an entire subspecies of bison can hide out in the woods, and we have no idea about them until later on, then think about, solitary, large, hairy creatures that tend to be sneaky and avoid humans. Makes it seem like a lot more believable, at least in this case. And actually, we have had, ancient times, there was something that resembled today's Bigfoot was. It was called Gigantopithecus, which is an ancient primate that was between 5.9 feet and 9.8 feet tall. The only fossils that exist are the jawbone, but some people believe that they were bipedal, which means they walk on two legs. The Wikipedia article states that based on the only very few jawbone remains found, all of which are U-shaped and widened towards the rear, this allows room for the windpipe to be within the jaw, allowing the skull to sit squarely on a fully erect spine, as in modern humans, rather than roughly in front of it, as in other great apes. Although the dominant view is that the Gigantopithecus walked on all fours, there is a chance that there was a giant bipedal ape in ancient times. So who's to say one couldn't have survived, right, or a small population of them survived to today?
No, there's just so much land.
There is.
There's so much land.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing, when I think of like the ocean, the earth is 80% water. You know what I mean? So it's like so much crap that's probably in there that we've never seen.
Right. No, absolutely.
So I wouldn't doubt anything like this because of the fact that there's just, we can't be everywhere.
No, we can't. And even in our more modern developed world where we explore most of the world, there's still plenty of remote places that no one goes to, like huge giant expanses, especially in the northwestern region, which is where most of the Sasquatch sightings come from. There's huge expanses of lands that no one ever...
Well, yeah, we don't live there. I mean, there's...
Yeah, and even then there are a ton of sightings, and it would be great to have some sort of physical subject to prove its existence. But I'm more inclined to believe in a Sasquatch more than other ones. But anyway, that's all we have on the Fouke Monster, which is the Southern Bigfoot. Let's move on to the next one.
This next one is the White River Monster. Now, when I read this, the White River Monster, I think of that show,
River Monsters.
River Monsters
with
yeah.
Jeremy Wade.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually it's a very similar concept to that.
This excerpt is from encyclopediaofarkansas.net. The White River Monster is one of Arkansas's premier mysteries. Since 1915, along the White River near Newport, which is Jackson County, the monster has appeared several times and has become a local legend. Sightings of Whitey began in 1915, but were sporadic until 1937. On July 1st of that year, Bramlett Bateman, owner of a plantation near the river, saw the monster. He reported it as having gray skin and being as wide as a car and 3 cars long. As news spread, construction of a huge rope net to capture the monster began. The monster had been seen in an eddy, so a diver was brought in to search for it. However, Whitey was not captured, and construction of the net stopped because of the lack of money and materials.
I've actually heard of the White River Monster before I started doing this, and so I was excited to get into all the details. So apparently it was believable enough to the locals that they started trying to find and catch it with the construction of a huge net. So let's move on to, in 1971, the sightings began again when someone reported seeing a gray creature with a horn sticking out from its forehead. Other witnesses described it as having a spiny back 20 feet long. Later, a trail of 3-toed, 14-inch prints was found in the White River area. Crushed vegetation and broken trees were evidence that something large passed by, and it assumed that the tracks were whiteys. So apparently, the White River Monster can also walk on land, at least according to this.
I was like, wait a minute, this just
You're like,
took a turn.
Hold on, we're talking about a river monster. It's probably just, that's, listeners, that's the thunder that's outside.
This reminds me of you've heard of the catfish at the dam.
Yeah.
At the Beaver Lake Dam in Rogers. Like, talk about the catfish.
And the White River is right under it.
Right.
Yeah. In 1973, the legislators signed into law a bill by State Senator Robert Harvey creating the White River Monster Refuge along the White River. The area is located between the southern point on the river known as Old Grand Glades and the northern point on the White River known as Rosie. It is illegal to harm the monster inside the refuge. While there have been no recent sightings, theories about whiteys abound. So, it's actually a protected species, apparently, in this part of the White River.
So we don't know it exists, but just in case.
But there's an actual Arkansas law that says, while the monster is within the White River Monster Refuge, you are not allowed to harm it in any way. So I thought that was a cool little tidbit. Is definitely an Arkansas thing. It's like, oh yeah, there's this giant fish thing.
If you see it.
Don't touch it.
Don't do nothing with it.
It is an endangered species, obviously. Although I do appreciate the sentiment behind it. There are some theories. One of them being a large alligator snapping turtle. They can get pretty big, like huge. Like there's one in the Oklahoma Aquarium that's ginormous that you can go and see there. So it accounts for some of the descriptions, such as the spiny back. It definitely has the size thing going for it. The sightings lasted through a couple decades, so it sort of...
Why does everything have a horn?
Because
everything has a horn.
Because it's more intimidating if it has a horn, Gary. Another interesting theory is that it's a very lost elephant seal, which is a theory put forth by biologist Roy P. Mackle from the University of Chicago, and he was super interested in cryptozoology. So this accounts for the gray skin and the large size. They actually, it is slightly possible that it can get into the White River from its natural habitat, but it's a very far-fetched idea. But the fact that an actual biologist...
I would believe that more than a snapping turtle.
Yeah. I mean, what people saw throughout these different sightings, they probably weren't even... If the White River Monster doesn't exist, it probably wasn't even the same creature. They probably each saw a different animal of some sort, which accounts for the varied descriptions.
Well, I think it would be hard to mistake a turtle of any kind.
Well, you would think, but apparently bears can sprout horns and turn into the Ozark Howler, so who knows?
That's a good point.
Who knows? My favorite theory is that it's a gulf sturgeon. So it accounts for the description of having a spiny back as well as the smooth gray skin. It accounts for the same color, they're both grayish, and they account for the size. Some can get over 6 feet long, and they can actually get into the White River from the Mississippi, which connects to the Gulf of Mexico. So it is entirely possible, in my opinion, from what I've found, that gulf sturgeon could make its way into the White River. So that's my personal theory on the matter. I'm not a biologist or cryptozoologist.
I've never even heard of one of those.
Well, we have sturgeons in Arkansas. They're just big spit fish with like sort of spines on them. They actually feature a lot on River Monsters with Jeremy Wade. So that's my count on that. And a fun fact about the White River Monster. So this is the second episode in a row with a Harry Potter reference. I'm not a Potterhead, but this came across in my research. I just thought it was a fun little fact. So J.K. Rowling, which is the author of the Harry Potter books, has apparently heard of the White River Monster as one of her American wizards, Thiago Quintana, uses the spine of the monster as a wand core. And a wand core is a part of a magical creature that affects the temperament of the wand, like other ones. Like there are many different wand cores, but in her American version of Hogwarts, one of them uses the spine of the White River Monster. So hey, good job, Arkansas. Yeah. We made it into the Harry Potter books. All right, so now we move on to.
Yeah. Now we're going to talk about the dog boy.
The dog boy, and it's not the mixture of a dog and a boy.
Oh, it's not like Teen Wolf or whatever?
No, not this time. Not this time. We may find something eventually. So it's not a werewolf. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
All right, so now we move on from flesh and blood monsters of Arkansas to a little bit of true crime and a lot of bit of ghost stories. We turn to the dog boy of Quitman, Arkansas, who is said to haunt a Victorian-era home there. According to Dr. Mike Barnett of the Heber Springs Historical Society, Quitman is much older than almost any community in north-central Arkansas. During the Civil War, it was a popular place for men to enlist in the army. Until 1870, Quitman was a major trading center and an important crossroads. It was a halfway point for those traveling from Memphis to Little Rock or from Batesville to Conway. There were nice big houses and buildings there. The haunted house in question was erected in 1890 and is located at 65 Mulberry Street in Quitman. Floyd and
Aline, I believe?
Floyd and Aline Bettis moved into the house in the early 1950s and had a son, Gerald Floyd Bettis, in 1954. All right, neighbors reported that Gerald was a difficult child from early on, saying his parents were good people, but Gerald was a brat, vicious and cruel. Gerald would catch stray dogs and cats, which led to his nickname of Dog Boy. He would eventually add on to the house so he would have a room for more stray animals. Kids bullied Gerald at school, and Gerald acted out for attention. According to neighbors, as reported by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Gerald Bettis' actions allegedly turned more sinister. He kept his parents virtually imprisoned in the upstairs part of the house, Hollabird said. He would feed them, but only when he decided it was time for them to eat, she said. By the time he was an adult, locals say Bettis towered over his elderly parents at 6'4" and weighed close to 300 pounds. It was also regularly reported that he beat up his father and even threw him out of an upstairs window one time during his teen years. Although he was in his 70s at the time, the elder Bettis hung onto the ledge until the local police showed up. According to the Heber Springs Sun-Times, Floyd Bettis died in 1981 after an illness at his home. Others say he was pushed down the staircase and died of a broken neck. Neighbors were understandably afraid of Gerald and said that his eyes seemed to glow at night. In the early 1980s, Gerald's mother, Aline, fell and broke her hip and was taken to the hospital. A nurse who worked at the hospital reported that Gerald slapped his mother around and threatened her in public. Not long after, Aline was placed in adult protective services and taken away from Gerald.
So I've never heard, I didn't know adult protective services existed until I was doing research for this story, and that's pretty messed up. And another thing that I'm not sure was made very clear by what I wrote, but when Gerald caught these dogs and cats, which led to his nickname of Dog Boy, he kept them not just to keep them, but he tortured the animals, apparently.
Ugh. Gerald grew and sold marijuana on the property of the house and was arrested for this as well as allegations of abuse of his mother. Gerald was imprisoned in the late 1980s and died of a drug overdose.
And then Aline died later in 1995, and the house was put up for sale and was purchased by Tony Weaver and his wife. The couple reported paranormal activity in the house and contacted Karen Schillings of the Central Arkansas Society for Paranormal Research, which I think is the greatest name of all time because their acronym is CASPR, otherwise known as Casper. Which is amazing. The Arkansas Democrat-Gazette published the following excerpt of the encounters. She said she would turn off all the lights before leaving to work on a night shift, but when she returned, the lights would be back on, Schilling said. At first, the woman thought such actions were the result of an intruder, but then more supernatural events began to happen. One time, pennies floated down the stairwell from the upstairs part of the house. These coins stopped and fell onto the floor all at once, right in front of her, Schilling said. After 6 months of such occurrences, the wife was very scared and did not want to live there anymore. Tony Weaver also had a share of baffling incidents. One day I was working on the house, and I saw a man looking through the foyer into the living room. He looked like a World War I soldier, complete with a helmet. He looked so real, and when he walked in the living room, I ran after him, but no one was there, he said. Hollibird's nephew, Quentin White, and his wife Stephanie lived in the house in 2003. Strange things would happen on a regular basis, like the commode would flush on its own, Stephanie said. One day, Quentin was working on the house, and he was on the phone with her. He heard a crash upstairs, she said, and went to find out what happened. White had previously stacked a large pile of 2x4s on the floor. When he reached the upstairs room, he told his wife that the boards were all standing up straight. The couple had only lived there for a few months. Weaver, who still owns the Bettis house, continues to show the home to prospective buyers, so far with little success. Weaver said once placed a new pair of sunglasses of prescription medication on a table. During the time he was there, he said he became angry about his inability to sell the house and voiced his resentment, saying, "These darn spooks, I'm tired of taking care of this place." He said his comments apparently angered someone or something, as later both the glasses and the medicine were gone. So they stole his meds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you get.
You know,
for
what I want
talking
to know
trash.
is if this was in the sale guide, you know.
Definitely not haunted, in like all caps.
This should be an asterisk somewhere on that page.
It says definitely not haunted in the asterisk, and you go down to where the key of the asterisk says definitely is haunted. Yeah. Weaver continued saying, if you bring somebody in there that they being the spirits don't like, you'll feel chills and your hair will stand up on end. He said one lady who was interested in buying the house brought her young daughter with her. The woman told Weaver that her daughter was sensitive. While the women were walking through the home, the daughter stopped on the stairs and said she felt very sad. Another time, some prospective buyers saw a recliner in the home flip back on its own like someone was sitting there. It stayed stuck like that the whole time they were looking at the place. Yet another prospect brought their dog with them to see the house, but the animal refused to go inside, Weaver said. Ed Munnerlin of Little Rock said he had eerie encounters in the Bettis house this summer. A former pilot with Federal Express, Munnerlin has worked remodeling this home since May. He prefers to work on the house at night because he says too many people who are curious about the ghosts want to come in. He has also had several unexplainable incidents happen to him. I'm a rational person. I don't believe in the paranormal, but since I've been working on that place, I feel very uncomfortable, like someone's watching me, he said. He also claims to have seen spirits several times. When I pull up into the driveway of the house at night, I see a man looking down on me. He is dressed in a brown jacket and a bow tie like from another time period. An extension to the house is where Munnerlin claims to see the ghost of Gerald Bettis looking at him several times. He was this weird, huge-looking cat with long brown hair, creepy eyes, and great big arms and hands. He walked right in front of me and glared at me, Munnerlin said. Right after I saw him, he walked through the hall and disappeared. So, I guess I kind of lied at the beginning. So apparently the ghost of Gerald Bettis has become some sort of weird animal hybrid human thing.
What?
Maybe like the spirits from the animals and his spirit got mixed up somehow, or maybe this is just how
that's how he wanted to look.
How he wanted to appear to this person, which is makes Gerald Bettis even creepier than just a regular ghost. He's like, or maybe he's just a furry. And that was just his persona that he saw walking through. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture this thing in my head.
So, the weird walking cat with long brown hair, creepy eyes, and great big arms and hands.
Wearing a brown suit.
Yeah, wearing a brown suit. He's a very dapper persona, apparently.
What are you doing in my house?
And apparently he's a 1920s Chicago gangster. So, Munnerlin said he also experienced what felt like a cold wind blowing down his neck. In 2005, Casper, which is the Central Arkansas Society of the Paranormal Research, investigated the house. Schillings was the lead researcher on the case. We went there on 2 different occasions, she said. First time, we noticed cold spots, 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the ambient temperature of the house. A very sensitive electromagnetic field detector was used that picks up all kinds of electromagnetic readings, and we picked up an energy force that had no explanation. So, a small note on these electromagnetic field detectors is like different electrical signals. They'll pick up that too, but they usually calibrate them beforehand so they don't pick up stuff during the actual investigation that's ordinary stuff like a fan kicking on or something like that.
Yeah.
So they're usually calibrated beforehand so they don't pick up that stuff.
Well, that's that little thing that you see them holding on like ghost hunters and
the EMF reader. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So Schillings also reported that the team tracked an entity through the kitchen area where one of the team members felt like someone touched them. When we went outside at one point to get some items from a car, we looked up and saw a face peering down at us, she said. All 3 of the Casper team members witnessed the face in the window, but it was confirmed that there was no one upstairs in the room at the time. The second time, the team used a medium who got in touch with what seemed to be the spirit of Gerald Bettis himself, Schilling said. He cursed us and told us to get out. Not too happy that they're there.
Did it sound like...
He wasn't. Did you hear that? He wants us to get out. Okay. The team used videotape to document what they considered to be additional evidence of the paranormal activity, including orbs flying through the wall and unexplainable flashing lights, she said. Although footage of these ghost hunting expeditions was shot over the 2 occasions, Schilling said that the more spectacular tape is missing. Multiple attempts to locate the film failed. It was disconcerting, she said.
Well, that's convenient.
It is awfully convenient that your best evidence of paranormal activity in the house has disappeared. Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about ghosts as well, and it sounds like something could be happening here, but maybe the Casper team was just sort of sensationalizing a little bit.
Well, that's their livelihood. I'm sure they get some sort of money for it.
No, for sure. Even if there are no ghosts, though, the whole story of Gerald Bettis.
Oh, yeah.
He was obviously a very abusive man who had a lot of mental issues. So I'm glad he was finally in prison. And
if I would have treated my parents that way, Lord help us.
You're right. So that's all we have for our stories today. I believe we covered all the subjects.
That was it?
That was it, at least for this episode. Gary, look at me.
I'm so sad.
No, look at me. There's a part 2 coming out.
Oh.
Yeah, we're going to cover even more. Yeah. Get excited.
I'm so excited. Are you guys excited?
I'm excited. Let's go ahead and move on to my little section of recent news.
Ozark Howler photos were sent to the Springfield News Leader in 2015 by a tipster named John Myers. Is that Myers or Myers?
I believe it's Myers.
John Myers. All right, because I'm pretty sure it's spelled just like John Mayer.
I think it's spelled like Michael
like
Myers.
The singer, John Mayer. Oh yeah, okay. Touche. Ozark Howler. Ozark Howler photos were sent to the Springfield News Leader in 2015 by a tipster named John Myers. Your body is a wonderland. Ozark Howler photos were sent to the Springfield News Leader in 2015 by a tipster named John Myers. Met some family in Devil's Den State Park this weekend for some camping, the tipster wrote. We were up near Yellow Rock Trailhead this morning and saw this thing chase a squirrel up a tree, and I've never seen anything like it. It had short black fur, a broad nose, and horns like a young deer, but it moved like a cat and had a long tail. Don't know what else it could have been but the howler. It was yelping and scratching at the tree, and I got this pretty good photo when it stopped and turned to look at me. Wish I had video or more photos, but it disappeared too fast. You can give me a call. I'm an electrician, so usually available to talk for a minute. Pictures appear to be photoshopped, although John Myers swears they are not. It's amazing what you can do with photos.
So, I actually found these photos, and I'm going to post them on the Facebook page. I already posted one of them to advertise this episode. But basically, it looks like a taxidermy animal that someone put together with like all these different animal parts. And they just put by a tree, take pictures. It is so static. It doesn't look alive at all, but it's hilarious. And they're like, so in the news story I found this in, they're like, it's totally Photoshop. And then John Myers himself called the news station, was like, I take offense that you think these are Photoshop because they're definitely not. So I'll have the pictures posted on the Facebook page so you guys can all see it. All right, so that's it for the Ozark Howler, the Fouke Monster, and the White River Monster. And also Mr. Gerald Bettis, the Dog Boy. Any final thoughts on these? Other than Arkansas is a pretty crazy place?
We already knew that.
yeah, we live here.
It's just a whole different side.
Yeah. And now you guys know, thanks to us.
Yes. Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained? we shouldn't do Russell Crowe impressions. Oh, yeah. We're pretty terrible at them. So, any Arkansans out there, anyone in the Ozarks area has heard any of these stories differently, please let me know by emailing me at snipehuntpodcast@gmail.com, or you can message me on Facebook through my Facebook page. This is part 1 of the series, and we have part 2 coming out soon.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We appreciate it.
And just because the episode's over doesn't mean if you want to add to it, you can't send us some more stuff, and we can make another one.
Absolutely. You can get in contact with us if you like to, even just to talk. We could just start something on the Facebook page. The best way to get new listeners to this podcast is to spread it by word of mouth. Just talk about it. That would be the biggest favor you could do for us. So thank you so much for listening. From monstrous beasts and a ghostly household to to America's most haunted hotel and mysterious deaths. Join us next episode as we continue exploring the creepy legends of Arkansas.